So, I'm going to begin a brand new series of reviews where I talk about all the Spider Man movies. At least all the Tobey Maguire Spider Man movies, the two Andrew Garfield Spider Man movies, as well as the two Tom Holland Spider Man movies, not counting his appearances in movies like Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame. So, with the release of Spider Man Brand New Day, I figured why not go back and look at all these movies again. I've been wanting to talk about these movies for a while, and I am very excited to at least talk about the first Spider-Man movie that came out all the way back in 2002. Man, I feel old that this movie is really old now. It's 24 years old. Wow, this movie is old. I remember seeing this movie on the big screen. I remember having to beg my family to basically see this movie, even though it was like 8 years old and it was PG-13. And they were like, we don't know, PG-13's a little iffy. And I walked away out of that movie saying that movie was a lot of fun. That was great. That was a really cool movie at the time. And I'll dive more into it, but I just wanted to get really right into it. So let's talk about the very first Spider-Man movie. So Spider-Man came out all the way back in 2002, was directed by Sam Raimi, and it starred Tobey Maguire, Willem Dafoe, Kirsten Dunst, James Franco, and it's about the origin story of Spider-Man, who is Peter Parker. He gets bitten by a spider, and he begins developing these powers and such as the controversial organic web shooters, a spider sense, strength, and he eventually begins tackling the Green Goblin, who is Norman Osborn, played by Willem Dafoe, and we have our very first Spider-Man movie. So this was a movie I remember being extremely excited for as a kid. I remember seeing the ads, it's like, that looks really cool, that looks really fun. Admittedly, at the time, I was not really into Spider-Man, but this movie kind of got me more invested in the character of Spider-Man, and I really enjoy watching this movie over and over again. I have a blast every time I watch this movie, and having watched it again a couple days ago, I'm just very glad that I just always find things to really enjoy about this movie, if I'm being honest. So let's start off with the performances of this movie. I think this is one of the perfectly cast movies, like a perfectly cast movie in my opinion. I think Tobey Maguire nails a lot of Peter Parker as a character. I found his character to be very interesting, where I was like being very passive at the beginning, like not really having much of a life outside of school and such. And I do find his character arc very interesting, like how he kind of grows from being like this kid who's always kind of being bullied to kind of being like this kid who stands up and does what's right. I always really appreciated that. I thought he did a great job with this movie. For a while, like for the last few years, I was kind of thinking the difference between him and Andrew Garfield, whereas like Tobey Maguire was a better Peter Parker, but not as good as Spider-Man, and Andrew Garfield is kind of the opposite. But honestly, I honestly didn't mind a lot of the things that he didn't do in this movie. Like, he doesn't have as many quips in this movie, which, if I'm being honest, looking back, there are a few quips here and there. They're not funny, but they're at least attempts at quips and such. So I felt that was working. But to me, the real standout in this movie is Willem Dafoe as Norman Osborn and the Green Goblin. After his transformation into Green Goblin, and just seeing that performance where he goes between being Norman and being Green Goblin, that is just great right there. And there's also a lot of great editing in this movie, particularly with the two of them. Like, that mirror scene is very well done, where you kind of realize this, where he sees his reflection in the mirror and he's holding a newspaper. That was really well done and really cool. I really thought his performance was great. It was tragic, but it was just perfect in my opinion. He's still my favorite of the Spider-Man villains in my opinion, and I'm just really, I just find his villain to be very fascinating. The costume aside, but we'll talk about that. Also, the other performances, Cliff Robertson, I thought did a great job as Uncle Ben. J.K. Simmons, also perfectly cast as, J. Jonah Jameson. Also, Rosemary Harris as, Aunt May. Kirsten Dunst, actually, I didn't mind her in this movie. I kind of felt like she was kind of like the girl next door who, despite a lot of the negative things that kind of are around her life, she still tries to see the positive aspects of life. And I do find that at least fascinating, at least. I do think her character, I do think she gets a lot, I do think she gets a bad rep in these movies, but honestly, I still dig her performance. I also really like about this movie is that the way they handle, like, shooting Spider-Man swinging through the city. Like, there are definitely some sequences where it's like, okay, he's kind of shooting and, like, swinging through the city and such, but no, there are times where it's like, you are actually, like, you're kind of like on a roller coaster. You're kind of just, like, swinging with Spider-Man, and I thought that was really cool. That was a really smart choice, seeing that's, like, it felt like you were actually Spider-Man for a while, just swinging along with him and such. Also, I will say this movie does have a very good comic book feel to it. I definitely feel like it was very poppy, it was very pulpy and such, and I do feel like there's a lot of bright colors that are really well done and such. And I do think that with the editing choices as well, it does kind of feel like a comic book movie as well. The editing in this movie is very underrated in my opinion. Like, the whole editing about, like, the scene where Peter comes home after the museum trip and such, the laboratory field trip and such, and he's just not feeling well because obviously he was bitten by the spider and he's going through the transformation and such, and then immediately cuts to Norman Osborn and he's going through his transformation. That is a very underrated editing. That's very underrated in my opinion, whereas like the direction of that story as well, where it's like, okay, we're gonna have Peter go through his transformation, but immediately afterwards, Norman's gonna go through his. I thought that was a very smart choice. Also, the fight sequences are a lot of fun in this movie. Like the main one at the end where Peter has to save either Mary Jane or the kids on the tram, and Green Goblin's like saying, decide your fate. The fight afterwards is very brutal, and it's just very. It definitely elevates the movie overall. Where it's like at first the fight sequences, in my opinion, are a little bit silly. Like the first one with Flash Thompson is kind of silly and all over the place, which is like it kind of looks odd, but it's like I get it because like Peter finally has a senses and it's like, okay, I know how this is gonna happen, so it's like, oh, I'll avoid this and such. But like by the end, it's like nearly every hit that Spider-Man takes is brutal. You feel that punch and you feel those punches, and it's just very intense and such. The one at the Oscorp fair and such, it can be a little silly and cartoonish, but I definitely feel like it was still fun overall and does have some pretty fun sequences, like Mary Jane kind of hanging on for dear life and such. I remember getting a toy of that, which is kind of a weird toy now that I think about it. But I do feel like this is a very fun action. There are very fun action sequences throughout this entire movie. And there are some things about this movie that maybe I didn't like as much overall. Like I remember thinking, watching this movie a few times over the years, it's like, why is Harry going after MJ despite the fact that, Peter likes her and he knows that Peter likes her and such? It never really made that much sense to me. And, I kind of get it now. It's like, he's going after her because he also had a crush on her, but also clearly Peter had a crush on her but never acted on it. But also the whole angle about how Norman seems to think of Peter more as a son than his actual son. That is very interesting. So it's like, if you're going to take my dad, I'm going to try to take your girl. It's like, that's kind of funny to me. Okay, maybe not funny, but it's like, okay, maybe I'm getting that now. So also, the whole controversial changes of this movie, the organic web shooters, a lot of people don't like that, and they find it as like, obviously it's very much against, the character of Spider-Man, where it's like, he made those web shooters himself because he's like very smart and such. I'm like, yeah, he is smart, but I feel like I was okay with it at the time, mainly because at the time I was not really into comic books and such, or the character of Spider-Man until after seeing this movie. So the fact that he has the organic web shooters is at least kind of interesting to me. I'm okay with it because, like, I think I heard someone else say it was like, if he doesn't have those web shooters, all he has is like strength and also spider sense. Like, that's not much. I feel like that's actually cooler in retrospect. Maybe not cooler, but at least it's unique. And also, again, less quips. There are definitely some quips in this movie that just kind of fall flat. Whereas, like, hey, kid, let mom and dad talk for a bit. Or, it's you who's out, Gobby, out of your mind. They're definitely cringy, but I feel like they're just attempts at trying to be funny. And I feel like he's still trying to figure out who he is as a hero. So I definitely don't mind it as much as some other people do. Again, the editing I think is very well done. The score by Danny Elfman has to be one of my favorite superhero scores in any movie, up there with the Dark Knight trilogy score. I think this may be my favorite. And I do think that the movie winds up blending various blending genres very well. But it blends like action movie, comic book, a love story. There's even aspects of a horror movie. I remember that sequence when, again, Peter is turning into Spider-Man overnight and he's got the blanket over him and he's like shivering and such, and you just see those images. It's like, that's pretty creepy. And also a lot of the aspects about Norman Osborn's character, it's very, very creepy. Like, him just kind of like hearing the laughter and just those cuts between like him realizing kind of the things that he's done and such, and the revelation that, he is also doing this and he doesn't quite understand it. Again, that mirror scene alone, that was great. Where it's like, it's like, you killed them, but he's like, we killed them. It's like, it's very well done overall. Aspects of a horror movie, aspects of a thriller, love story, action movie, superhero movie. This is a movie that I think is a lot of fun, and no matter what, I will still go back to this movie all the time. But there are some things in this movie that I don't really like, and even though I will say the editing in this movie and the direction of the movie is very underrated, there are some choices where I'm like, okay, I don't think you really need this. Like, after Peter gets the job at the Daily Bugle and such, he goes to Betty and he's like, hey, I'm a photographer now. And she just smiles at him awkwardly. It's like, you could have cut that out and you would have missed nothing. And also, even though I think most of the actors in this movie does do a pretty good job, the one person I feel like does not do a great job overall is James Franco. I found his performance to be kind of bland and kind of dry, and I just found like every majority of the lines that he has in this movie just sound very much the same, like no matter what emotion he has. I guess like around the third act he does get a little better, like starting from the Thanksgiving scene and the scene where Spider-Man brings Norman's dead body back. That is at least getting better, at least. So, and he does get better into maybe three. We'll talk about those two movies later. But I found him to be kind of the weakest link in the movie overall. I do think this movie overall, it kind of just made me excited to go to the movies, and it just made me excited to watch movies. And I just feel like this movie definitely has a special place because this was probably the first movie I saw where it's like I kind of felt like I was being seen in a character and such. And that character was Spider-Man. That was Peter Parker's character and such. I really liked this movie. I've seen it multiple times. I usually watch it at least once a year. And I love going back to this movie. I can't wait to go back to some of the other Spider-Man movies, mainly two. But we'll talk about those later. But overall, the first Spider-Man movie, I thought the performances were really good for the most part. The editing, the score, the fact that you're swinging with Spider-Man, the comic book feel to it, the fight sequences are really good. The even some things I didn't really like about the movie, it's like, okay, I kind of understand why you went in this direction. And also, there are definitely some controversial changes, which honestly I don't mind as much for various reasons. The score, it blends genres very well. The whole angle about Peter learning about responsibility and such, which is also kind of great in my opinion, where it's like how he handles that whole situation where he doesn't get the money he deserves, which that always kind of made me mad. Like he gets only $100 for beating him in 2 minutes. Like honestly, you should have gotten more money for beating him in 2 minutes. I don't get that. Like that pisses me off. And I get why he does the things that he does, like, oh, he could beat him up, but he doesn't. He doesn't because it's like, yeah, I'm getting my revenge on you. But clearly, that had consequences about how he allegedly killed Uncle Ben and such, and how he discovers that the guy he's chasing, who we think killed Uncle Ben and such, and he discovers like, oh, I might have caused it. I thought that was a great scene too. So I do feel like this movie. I do think this movie is really fun. I do think this movie is really great. I do think it blends everything very well. The performances are really good. I do like the feel of this movie, the swinging with Spider-Man and such. Fight sequences are really good. The editing, score, everything. And even though I don't like some choices, like some awkward editing in the movie, and also James Franco, I think, is unfortunately the weakest link of this movie. This is still a movie I go back to every once in a while, and I'm very excited to go back to the other Spider-Man movies. Mainly two, but we'll dive into them. I'll give Spider-Man 3.5 out of 4 stars. See it. So, what was the first movie you remember where you felt connected to a character? Comment down below, subscribe to the channel. This is Pat. Stay safe.